Iowa football camp is officially underway, and the foundation for the 2026 season starts now. There are three storylines that will define the Hawkeyes' path to making a run to the college football playoff.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast, your daily Iowa Hawkeye podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Join all the action at FanDuel.com to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer this MLB season. Coming up today, we're going to talk a little bit about what is happening in the Big Ten and a number that has come out from offshore and a couple of properties out there in the sports book here in the States that you can look at, including total wins in the Big Ten, including the Iowa Hawkeyes. The number set at 4.5 feels like maybe a little bit low on that one. We'll get into that a little bit later on. David Eichholt's also going to join us from 24/7 Sports, HawkeyeInsider.com. We'll get the latest on the Hawkeyes, a look back at Chicago last week as David Eichholt was there for Big Ten Football Media Days. We begin today as camp has opened this week for Iowa football. It is the time we've been waiting for as we get closer and closer to football season. Camp is here. Talking season, well, it's not officially over because we still got a couple of weeks before we get to the games, but here we are in the month of August and a lot to talk about with this Iowa football team. So today, I want to break down three storylines that I think are going to be incredibly important for this football team this season, really going to have a chance to define what it is. Now, at the top, it's one that we have talked about a ton here on Locked On Hawkeyes. I'm sure you've had it over a coffee, over a beer, talking with your family, your friends. It is something that comes up all the time. Who is the Hawkeyes quarterback going to be this season? Hank Brown, Jeremy Hecklinski, we've gone back and forth all season long. The reason, though, that I have optimism, and optimism that we are going to see a step forward this year out of the offense, and regardless of who it is that's going to win this quarterback job, is because of the continuity and what they have, the ability for both of these guys to go through spring practice, to go through August camp, to have an ability throughout this next 3 weeks to really hone in on what they are going to do, what they're going to look like, and to be able to do that without the restrictions that we've seen the last couple of seasons. Year number one, Tim Lester comes in. He said, looked around that quarterback room and said, oh, we got work to do. And revamped what they did right away, brought in some different guys. But of course, Cade McNamara was returning. Though he was returning, he was also coming off an injury. Wasn't able to go through the spring and was limited during August camp. And even at that point, there were a lot of rumblings, remember, during that time that Brendan Sullivan was really pushing him and an opportunity there. Now we go into year number two. Mark Gradowski is going to be the guy. He's coming off shoulder surgery. He didn't get a full camp. He didn't get a full spring practice. In fact, all he was doing was going through kind of mental reps, if you will, and was not able to throw the football. I think at one point he was able late in spring to throw like a Nerf football around, but that's all it was. Well, now you have two guys that went through it, that went through the rigors of the spring practice, are going to be here raring to go. It's not about them health-wise being ready. It's just getting them game ready for this season. And because of that, I truly believe that there is going to take a step forward this year at the quarterback position. Who's it going to be? If it was me, I'd be Jeremy Hecklinski. We've talked about this in the past and how this is going to look with the fan base, the disappointment of what happened late in the game against Indiana. I think Hank Brown is just working behind the 8-ball inside the fan base. Now, that shouldn't matter. And if Hank Brown goes out there and plays at a high level, you know that obviously the fan base is going to get behind him. But because of what happened in that game, Hecklinski taking over, and what we've seen recently with guys that are more mobile, the guys that can move around a little bit, we know that the crowd favorite, the fan favorite out of this 1-2 punch is going to be Jeremy Hecklinski this season. Speaking of that quarterback spot, one other thing that I continue to ponder with this is the very real possibility that we're going to see both of these guys during the non-conference and not in mop-up duty. Look, if all goes according to plan, they should blow out Northern Illinois in game number 1. They really should blow out Iowa State in game number 2 and cruise against UNI in game number 3. And there we go. We're ready to go into the game against UNI. Whoever wins this job, though, I personally would like to see both of these guys get opportunities with the first team. It's something that Kirk Ferentz has not done very often. You go back to really the biggest one was Jake Christensen against Ricky Stanzi, and eventually he got to the right choice and Ricky Stanzi on that one. We go to Jake Rudock and CJ Beathard, eventually got to that one too. It's different, and I think it might be different this year also because of Tim Lester. Having Tim Lester there, a guy that I believe that Kirk Ferentz really respects his opinion, and listening to Tim Lester in different interviews throughout the course of this season, I really think that he is going to have something that is set up in a way that he is going to be maybe more comfortable playing two quarterbacks and giving that opportunity. Now, what we don't know at this point in time, one of these two guys might just run with the job. One of these guys just might take it and run with it, and this is going to be an easy decision by the time we get to week number 1 against Northern Illinois that either Hank Brown or Jeremy Hecklinski is going to get it done. I don't believe it's going to happen. I think it's going to be incredibly close. It's going to be tight. I'd like to see both of these guys. And that goes hand in hand with number 2 on my storyline list, and that is something we talked about, just touched on a moment earlier, and that is the passing game taking a step forward. At this point, the excuses are over for Tim Lester. You're going into year number 3. You have a quarterback room. You have guys now that have experience inside your system. Regardless of the quarterback, now it is time to take the step forward. We've seen huge gains the first 2 years out of what they've been able to do running the football. And the evolution of the running game that has happened from year number 1 and Caleb Johnson and the great season that he was able to have a season ago, last year behind the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line, what they were able to do with Kamari Bolton and company. The running back room, absolutely stacked. The running game has been fixed of what they've done. Now it is time to put up or shut up in the passing game. Wide receivers, Tony Diaz, we know the buzz. Evan James, another speedster to help out coming in. You have returning guys, and Reese Van Der Zee, we know when he's healthy what a big-time weapon Van Der Zee can be for this team. A Dayton Howard, a Jarrett Bowie, who saw experience a couple of years back. Some other young guys in that wide receiver room. You have that. You have a preseason All-American tight end. You have what I think is going to be a good offensive line. The time is now. Pressure on Tim Lester. You need to deliver some kind of semblance of a passing game coming up this season. And then finally, number 3 on my storyline list, and that is, can Phil Parker work his magic once again with this defense? Iowa overall has the lowest production returning across the board, offensively and defensively, in all of college basketball at the Power 4 conference level. This defense lost a ton, and specifically up front. I believe that Seth Wallace is going to put a good product on the field at the linebacker spot. And with all the young talent, coupled with the return of Jaden Montgomery, who played well last season when he came in and got inserted into the lineup, you feel good there. We know in the defensive backfield they're going to be solid. I mean, even in the worst case scenario, you know they're going to be good. It's just, can they be elite in the defensive backfield with Phil Parker's tutelage? And this goes more hand in hand. It's not just on Phil Parker, but it's also Kelvin Bell and the rest of the defensive coaches of putting something together. But this might be about as difficult as it's going to be for Phil Parker to put a good defense on the field, and it's because of those questions up front. If he's able to do that, they're able to figure that out, they're going to be in good shape. There's a lot of bodies, a lot of opportunities. Now it's going to be up to him. And we saw a season ago, Iowa used more blitzing than they had in a number of years. We saw them coming from all kinds of different directions, and Phil Parker would dial it up from time to time. But it felt like it went to another level next season. Is that something that continues? Is that something that's going to have to continue this season? And also, are we going to see a defensive line, and specifically a defensive end, maybe they can generate more of a pass rush this season? If that happens, that's going to ease everything for everyone this season. David Eichholt was in Chicago last week for HawkeyeInsider.com, and he's going to join us next. So look back at Chicago, what he heard from Big Ten Football Media Day, how good are the Hawkeyes going to be up front, offensive line, defensive line. We'll get into that and a whole lot more. Plus, talk a little CC, Caitlin Clark, when we come back. Stay right there. David Eichholt joins us when we come back on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Baseball fans, if you think you know who's hitting a homer today, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with Daily Dingers. It's easy to play. Just make your free pick on who you think will hit a home run in their game. If you're right, you'll receive a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season. Daily Dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with every day's games, whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on the matchups across the league. Every game has someone capable of going deep. Now you get the chance to make your prediction before first pitch. Couple of fun series this weekend with Midwest teams. You got the Cubs and the Royals getting together, Chicago KC matching up, and you got the Twins and the Brewers, a fun rivalry there. Jump aboard. Cody Clements, maybe that's your pick. Whoever it is, they're covered for you over on FanDuel. Are you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of MLB. Trent Condon back with you once again on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast, your daily Iowa Hawkeye podcast. Make sure you hit subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube, and a 5-star review over on the podcast side, as we are joined by David Eichholt from HawkeyeInsider.com, part of 24/7 Sports. David, let's talk Hawkeyes, and let's get into football. Chicago last week for Big Ten football media days. Kirk Ferentz talked about the boogeyman, Tony Diaz. The hype train continues on that one. I want to go to a different component, though, and that's the offensive line. And he brought up Cael Winter, who, fresh off the hail toss victory in Solon at Beef Days, that usually has turned into something pretty good for guys up front. He's a local kid here from Central Iowa, Waukee Northwest. Remember seeing him, and he looked different out there, certainly at the high school level. He's a guy that's had some buzz for a former walk-on and what he was for this program. Is it real that we actually have a battle potentially brewing here at the center position for Iowa?
Yeah, I think without a question. His kind of rise over the past several months reminds me of a guy that, could be a mainstay on the defense, and that's Jacob Wallace. Like, the amount of times Cael Winter has been unpromptedly brought up by teammates and coaches, you have to pay attention. It's not just a buzz anymore. It's a legitimate noise and conversation that we're having right now. So I'm very curious from this aspect. I know there's no doubt that people believe, especially at the NFL level, that Cade Pieper could be an elite center prospect. He could have gone last season and been a potential first-round pick. But I also believe that Iowa is going to put their best 5 players out there and figure out positions later. That's what Kirk Ferentz has excelled at. That's what George Barnett has excelled at when you look at what he's accomplished over the last couple of years. And it will be interesting because I also don't feel like you can go 2 or 3 toes in, right, when it comes to center. It's probably the second or third most important position on the offense. You call out the pre-snap reads, get your line settled, snap the ball, the chemistry at the quarterback. I do think Cael Winter has a legitimate shot at being center, and if he does prove to be good enough, then you look at Iowa. I would say they have an elite right guard if they move Cade Pieper back over there, and I think they have a really all Big Ten caliber guy at left guard in Leighton Jones. So Iowa's offensive line, I do expect to be another strength this year. Obviously, losing 3 people to the NFL, it's never easy to overcome. But I think what George Barnett and Kirk Ferentz have done is really impressive. But I got to tell you, man, that the Cael Winter buzz is real. And if he ends up being in that starting 5 or maybe the 6th man, maybe just a step back from the starting 5, it's really not going to surprise me. There's a lot of positive buzz around him.
And you look at Leighton Jones and what he did when he came in for injury last year. He looked the part. I thought Dotzler was at minimum okay, another year experience, and now a starter at the right tackle position. I'm with you. I think this offensive line is going to be good. When you look at the depth component, you got Michael Myslinski. We know it's about health with him. I want to go to a young guy, though, Lucas Allgeier. You talk about those guys, David, that just are always kind of brought up at different times. I've heard Coach Barnett talk about him, heard Coach Ferentz talk about him. He seems to be out of that young group of offensive linemen, maybe the next in line that they feel really good about. What can you tell us about Lucas Allgeier?
Yeah, I mean, you just know there's certain players that come through the program and they're going to be a dude. I think Lucas Allgeier fits that bill. But the question is he going to be a dude this year or with one more year of development? Whenever he sees the field, I expect him to be a really, really good player. I think he's a future Sunday player. I do think he's in contention for that right guard spot. So we mentioned Cael Winter, obviously Cade Pieper there, Michael Myslinski coming back for one more year. But Allgeier, I would say, is right in that mix. There's a reason why Kirk said they are open to playing 8, maybe even 9 offensive linemen. There's really good competition there. I mean, Allgeier is the guy that I think George Barnett loves. We talked a little bit when I talked to him about a month ago on my podcast. He really opened up about him and the athletic traits that he has. And he just understands what it takes to be a college football player. Like, there's some guys, they might have the ability, but they don't understand everything it takes from a day-to-day life perspective to really piece everything together to be great on the field. Allgeier just seems like he picked up on that immediately. I think it's a huge fall camp for him to see if he will be a part of that main mix this season. But, it will be very interesting just in terms of, I think next year he'll start regardless. But will he be a part of the starting five this year? I'm going to say it's a little bit too early. But if he goes in there and maybe has like a Leighton Jones type role and impact, it won't surprise me. Remember, Tim Lester and Kirk Ferentz have talked about how they didn't even know Leighton Jones got thrown in when Bo Stevens went out last year, and they couldn't tell the difference because of how efficient Leighton Jones was. So I could see probably a similar type of role with him.
David, listening to your guys' videos and watching them over at Hawkeye Insider last week from Chicago, one thing jumped out, and that was when Kirk Ferentz was talking about special teams. And I just kind of chuckled to myself as I was watching as he was talking about, they feel really good about the Gunners. Well, how many times do we talk about the Gunners or the coverage unit and those kind of things? And outside of when Darrell Wilson and Lester Erb were running the special teams, and I talked about the coverage units a whole lot at that time because they stunk. But that aside, that's not what we talk about. We talk about the specialists. We talk about the return men and who it's going to be. Any insight into a leg up, both in the punting and the kicking competition, and then who you think those returners are going to be?
Yeah, I think if you don't put Zach Lutmer as the starting punt returner, I think you're making a mistake. Right. I mean, I just think he's a guy that's so dynamic with the ball in his hands. We saw what he's been able to do when he's intercepted passes. He's capable of a big return. I hate using this comparison because it's so easy, Trent, but it's a Cooper DeJean light. Like they're very similar in run styles. I do think Cooper has a little bit of a leg up in terms of athleticism, but that's no shade against Lutmer. Lutmer's tremendous. And I feel bad for whoever has to be a kick returner because I don't think anybody's going to replace Caden Wetjen. I would argue he's the best returner in Big Ten history, and there's a reason why he's a fourth-round pick, and it wasn't due to his receiving production during his time as a Hawkeye, right? So I would say when it comes to kick returner, I think they throw in a few different players, maybe a Jalen Watson. Another couple guys I've heard, I think Brevin Dahl, if he's healthy, I think he'll be able to get back there just with his straight line breakaway speed. And another name that people might not know but might ring a bell, what about Braden Jackson? He's another guy that might be just down in that running back rotation. But I've heard, he's got potential to really kind of break free if he gets out in the open field, and he's got good vision there. And then maybe throwing a guy like a Jalen Watson or maybe another skill position player. I think you leave Tony Diaz and Evan James and those guys out of that mix. But those would probably be some of the names right now. But, I mean, at this point, Trent, when it comes to kick returning, I think they're going to try about 8 to 10 different guys back there and just see who can really, be more than just a flash in the pan.
Going back to the spring, we got to see the guys kick a little bit. Eli Ozick coming in from North Dakota State. And then, of course, Caden Burr, who returned after a redshirt season that we don't need redshirt seasons anymore. But when you look at those two guys in the competition, I mean, is it as simple as Ozick's the guy? And could we see a role for Burr? I remember hearing he does have a really strong leg.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the big question for me right now. I mean, my thing is, I just don't think you bring in a guy like Ozick just because of how successful he was at North Dakota State. Like, if he's not the starting kicker, I'll be surprised. I think Ozick's going to be the guy that they expect to step up. He's kicked in some big games. He's had big moments, and he was consistent as almost can be. But in terms of the actual kickoff unit, it wouldn't be surprised me if Caden Burr was part of that mix if they want to use two kickers. I personally would not be thrilled about that idea, but I'm also kind of new school. I know that used to be a much more popular thing back in the day too. But that would be something that I think right up Kirk Ferentz's wheelhouse. So Caden Burr, I would not be surprised if he does kickoffs. But again, if you look at Ozick's track record and his trajectory, I just have a really hard time not seeing him as the starting kicker for Iowa.
David, when Kirk Ferentz mentioned he doesn't anticipate anybody on the defensive line playing 500 snaps, that may be a little concerned. Now, I think Bryce Hawthorne needs to have a standout season this year to help at the defensive tackle spot. I think there are plenty of options, but are they good options? After listening to Kirk and what we've talked about that defensive line and specifically defensive tackle, kind of where you sit now, and do you think at minimum they can be okay up front?
I'll tell you what, that's my number one concern about this team right now, even more than special teams, because I think special teams is so ingrained in the culture of Iowa and everybody understands the importance and they practice it all year. And I think Chris Polizzi knows what he's doing. I mean, they have Brock Sherman. They retained him. He's been LeVar Wood's right-hand man for the past several years. Defensive line is interesting. I think they're a year away from being really good. It's not so much that they don't have the talent, because I do think they have guys with high potential. I just think they need the on-field reps to really piece it together. I mean, they lose 7 of their top 8 guys. Yes, I think you'll say Epinesa is going to be really good down the line without question, right? Bryce Hawthorne, I think, has to be the man in the middle. He's had a year to adjust to Big Ten play after transferring from South Dakota. That's going to be a guy I'm very curious if he can be the breakout guy. Another guy I'd also like to keep in mind is Kamari Brown, the Elon transfer. Again, FCS to Big Ten. I think it'd be a really good idea for Ferentz and company to have him as like a pass rush specialist. Just let him pin his ears back, utilize that explosiveness, and go get the quarterback. But you think about Iowa's defensive line, what's made them great? It's consistency, it's outstanding leadership, and it's the ability to contain the edges. I mean, Aaron Graves, Joe Evans, Ethan Herkett, these are all guys that, you know, they were in leadership roles for multiple years. Iowa really doesn't have that at this point. So I would be more worried about the inside than the outside. I think the outside will eventually piece it all together and be good. But you also think about that daunting start to Big Ten play, right? At Michigan, Ohio State, at Washington. Trent, these guys can't peak in November. They need about a year's worth of experience just in the non-conference if they're going to try to be able to chase down Bryce Underwood, if they're going to get pressure on Julian Sayin, and then you go up against Devin Williams. I mean, that's a really tough quarterback trio to go against in 3 weeks. So to answer your question, yeah, defensive line is my number one concern, and I think people, I'm not going to say should be worried about it, but man, they better make some progress here over the next month.
I want to wrap things up over on some basketball, and specifically somebody that you got to know and cover and know very well in Caitlin Clark and what's happening in the WNBA and what's happening on that front from the shut up and dribble crowd now, don't shut up and dribble. It is so head scratch. It's so frustrating to watch what should be a celebration, a fun time in sport. And it's just now in year number 3, it is not enjoyable. And it's because of the discourse that is out there. I know you follow it and cover it a lot more than I do, but just being online with that sport and the vitriol that is out there, I don't know how you do it, David.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in that same boat right now, and it's amazing to me that the WNBA had 2 years to prepare for the next wave of stars. I mean, even take Caitlin Clark out of it. They had time to prepare for Paige Beckers. They had time to prepare for Angel Reese and all these other great talents, right? None of that matters because they care about everything other than basketball. Like, I blame the media just as much as the fans for the online discourse. I think that they need to start limiting the media to some degree. I think people are also just utilizing Caitlin's stardom and Angel Reese's stardom to push narratives that I don't think either one of them really care about. And it's really tough for me, Trent, to say it's a sports league at this point, just because it just feels like they don't like they're pushing whatever they want. And then there's a game that goes on. They talk about for 5 seconds, and then what's everything else made up for in terms of the post-game press conferences and everything like that. Like, I'm not fully checking out, but they are really, really botching a chance to grow the league in general. And it's just really tough, I think, to attract, like yourself, like the casual sports fan or somebody that would be interested. It's just turning everybody away. And ultimately, I do think that's going to cost them tens of millions of dollars. And it's just really unfortunate that this is kind of where we're at right now with it.
Finally, back to the Hawkeyes and the women's basketball front. I know you had a number of opportunities this summer to see them practicing and going through. Where do you sit with this team? Just how good is the women's basketball team going to be in year number 3 of Jan Jensen?
I mean, I think they'll be a top 10 team. I thought they were better than I thought they would be just on paper after seeing them a handful of times. Like, this is probably one of the more well-balanced teams that I've covered at Iowa. Yes, Caitlin Clark and what they had was tremendous, but you also had, you know, the leading scorer in NCAA history. Danny Carnegie is an all-SEC guard. She's an alpha. You have Ava Heighton, who I think is still underrated. I think she's a top 3 post player in America. I am worried about the fact that they have 11 total players on the roster, Trent, but this is going to be a group to where I think they know the pressure's on for them to make a second weekend. And just with the actual makeup of this group and the new offense and all these other things being in there, I'm going to be really surprised if this is not a top 10 team all year long and probably a top 3 or 4 team in the Big Ten Conference. I think what Jan Jensen did this offseason should be commended, and I'm very, very curious to see how it all comes together. But they're going to be really good. I think Iowa's men's team's going to be really good. It's going to be a pretty fun year, I think, for the average Iowa fan.
David Eichholt joining us, HawkeyeInsider.com. Thanks to David for his time, as always, talking some Hawks with us as we talk football and a little women's basketball as well with David Eichholt. Coming back on the other side, wrapping back up with some football talk. Iowa's Big Ten over-under. This is just the 9 conference games, is at 4.5. seems a little bit low. We'll talk about it when we come back. Stay right there. This is your daily Iowa Hawkeye podcast, Locked On Hawkeyes. There are more live events than ever worth seeing right now. Games, concerts, comedy shows, festivals. The hard part? Actually deciding what you want to attend. It's actually getting the tickets that's the most difficult. Between long wait lines, confusing checkout processes, and surprise fees, buying tickets can sometimes feel harder than it should. That's why so many fans are turning to Game Time. The app is built to make buying tickets simple with upfront pricing, seat views before you buy, and exclusive saving opportunities that help you get to the events you want without the hassle. Well, of course, we know there's already sellouts this year at Kinnick Stadium, but that doesn't mean you can't go there. And what an opportunity to get into Kinnick and watch the Hawkeyes. They're doing it with Game Time. You can see exactly where your seat is inside the building. And my favorite part, no more surprise fees, something that is incredibly frustrating if you're buying tickets online. Not the case with Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to every type of event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We are your daily Iowa Hawkeye podcast. You can also join us ad-free over with our friends and what we're putting together right now with our Everydayer Club. That's right, an opportunity for you to join us each and every day with the Everydayer Club. Go to lockedonhawkeyes.supercast.com. That's lockedonhawkeyes.supercast.com to join, an opportunity for you to join ad-free audio. Well, as we wrap things up here, I saw this number that came through offshore, and I get an email from one of the marketers there that sent things out to a bunch of radio people and podcasters and the like. And though I do not bet offshore, there's usually some interesting things there. And I did find a place onshore that does have this. Now, by the time we get closer to the season, I would anticipate FanDuel will also have these numbers available for everybody to fire at. But it is the over-under in terms of wins just in conference games. Take away the 3 non-conference games, and this goes for everybody at the major structure in college football. Now, we know the daunting start to the schedule for Iowa. When Big Ten plays begins, it's a road trip to Ann Arbor to take on Michigan, home for Ohio State, preseason number 1 in the coaches poll, and then a top 20 matchup out at Washington in Seattle on a short week as a play on Friday. Then after that, the schedule eases up. Even if you believe that Iowa's going to lose all 3 of those first 3 games, even if you think they're going to go 0-3 to start the Big Ten, that means they still have to lose 2 more games the rest of the way for that number to be under. At 4.5 wins, they got to get to just 5-4 in order for it to hit the over. And when you look at the rest of the slate, you got Minnesota, you got Wisconsin, Northwestern, Illinois, Nebraska. Even if you don't have, if you're a little more pessimistic on that front, boy, that feels like one Iowa should be in good shape. And if it doesn't happen, it's going to be a very frustrating year, no doubt, in Iowa City. Back with you tomorrow, Tom Kakert from Hawkeye Report. He will join us as we'll talk about the latest on the Hawkeye front. Camp beginning and some buzz starting. We'll get into some of those buzz players and some of the more important guys coming up this season for Iowa football that are flying under the radar. Tom Kakert will also give us an update in the recruiting world with basketball, as another big name has narrowed down their list and the Iowa Hawkeyes amongst the finalists for his services. We'll talk about that with Tom coming up tomorrow. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Don't forget, you can join us as well with the Everydayer Club, an opportunity for you to get the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast ad-free each and every day. LockedOnHawkeyes.supercast is where you go for that. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Until then, go Hawks.